Liam Carter didn't plan to fall for anyone, least of all the woman who once loved his brother. But when he returns home after years of guilt and silence, he finds Margot still living in the cottage Julian left behind, surrounded by paint memory and fire. She was supposed to be part of the past. Instead, she becomes the one person who sees him clearly. In a house filled with grief, two unlikely souls discover that healing sometimes begins where heartbreak ends. Liam hadn't seen the cottage in 5 years, but it looked the same, if not more haunted than he remembered. The driveway crunched under the tires of his rental car as he pulled in and let the engine idle, fingers still clenched around the wheel. The sky was gray, as if the weather had gotten the memo about his mood. It wasn't raining yet, but the clouds hung low and heavy, the air thick with the kind of chill that wasn't just cold, it was loaded. He shut off the car. It wasn't supposed to take this long to come back. His mom had told him over voicemail that the property still needed to be handled, whatever that meant. Julian had died 2 years ago, and Liam had done what he always did, fled to Southeast Asia, then to Portugal, then to the furthest corners of places people went when they didn't want to be found. But grief, like most unresolved things, waited. And apparently so did Julian's cottage. Liam grabbed his duffel bag from the back seat and took the familiar flagstone path to the porch. The place was too quiet. He paused at the door, exhaled, then unlocked it with the key his mother had mailed him in a crumpled envelope, with a sticky note that read simply, "Do what you can. Sell it if you want. Love, Mom." He pushed the door open and stopped. There was music playing, faint, scratchy, and unmistakably coming from a real record player. It wasn't Julian's kind of music either. It was Jose's, sultry and low, the kind you heard in smoky lounges filled with secrets. And then he smelled it: linseed oil, citrus cleaner, and something floral. Not the smell of a place abandoned. "Hello," he called, stepping inside cautiously. The living room was scattered with canvases, not old ones, wet ones. Fresh strokes of deep green, bright ochre, a sunburst in progress. Someone had been painting. "What the can I help you?" The voice came from the kitchen. A woman stepped into the room barefoot in paint-smeared jeans and a cropped sweatshirt that hung off one shoulder. Her hair was a messy bun of dark waves, and she held a dripping brush in one hand like a dagger. Her expression was wary and unapologetic. Liam blinked. "Margot." She narrowed her eyes. "And you are Liam," he said slowly. "Julian's brother." Her expression barely shifted. "Oh, I didn't think anyone still lived here." "I do," she said just as slowly. "Have been for a while." "You weren't in the paperwork," he said, confused. "Because there was no paperwork," she replied. "Julian never got around to updating the will." Liam let his bag slide off his shoulder and hit the floor. "So you're just living here?" Her jaw tensed, but her eyes stayed sharp. "Nice to see the Carter charm is still intact." Liam raised a hand. "Sorry that came out wrong, no kidding." They stared at each other, not quite strangers, but not close enough to pretend they weren't standing in the crater of a shared ghost. He broke the silence. "My mom said the house needed to be settled. She didn't say anything about you. She wouldn't have," Margot said, crossing her arms. Liam glanced around the room. It looked lived in. Dishes in the sink, paint supplies on the sideboard, a folded blanket over the couch he remembered Julian sprawling on during football games. "This was his place," Liam said softly. Margot followed his gaze. "It was supposed to be our place." Liam met her eyes again. "You two broke up 6 months before," he said. "Does that mean I stopped existing?" "No," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "It just complicates things. It's always complicated when you're not the one left behind." The words hit harder than they should have. Liam didn't know what to say, so he walked toward the record player, letting the music fill the silence. "You mind if I stay here?" he asked finally. "Just for a few days to sort through things?" Margot studied him, skeptical. "Where guest room?" She hesitated. "Fine, as long as you don't touch my brushes." "Deal." She turned and walked back into the kitchen. He stood alone in the middle of the living room and tried to breathe. The guest room was still beige. Julian had never cared much for decorating. Said color belonged in life, not on walls. Liam tossed his bag onto the bed and opened the window, letting in the salt air and the sound of gulls. Down the hall, he heard Margot's voice on the phone, calm, controlled, probably talking to one of her students or a friend who knew not to ask too many questions. She had that kind of voice, steady like scaffolding. He wandered into the hallway and found himself at the door of Julian's office. It was locked. Of course it was. Instead, he moved to the shelves along the hallway wall. Books, maps, a ceramic dog Julian had won at a carnival when Liam was 10. He picked it up, smiling faintly, until he saw the notebook wedged behind it. A journal. Julian's. He knew he shouldn't open it, but he did. The handwriting was tight and looping like someone trying to keep up with their thoughts. Skimming, he saw notes about lesson plans Julian had taught history. Then an entry dated 2 weeks before his death, saw Margot at the grocery store. Didn't speak. Her hand was still wearing paint. Always paint. She looked thinner. Happier or just free? I still want to call her. But what would I say? Sorry I broke us. Sorry I became someone you couldn't stay for. She deserves better. She always did. Liam closed the journal gently. When he turned, Margot was in the doorway. How much did you read? Enough. She sighed, walked into the hall, and sat on the floor with her back against the wall. He used to write when he couldn't talk. You know that, right? He never wrote to me. You left. Liam nodded. Yeah, I did. They sat in silence. Finally, she asked, do you hate him? Liam blinked. What? For leaving, for being who he was, for making all of us orbit him. I don't know, Liam admitted. I think I hated the gravity. Margot laughed bitter and warm at once. That sounds about right, she stood. Dinner's at 7. I'm not making anything fancy. Good, he said. I burn water. She paused. You really staying? For now. Okay, she said. But I get the bathroom first. Noted. She disappeared down the hall. Liam stood alone again, the weight of the journal still pressing into his chest. He wasn't sure why he'd come back, but something told him this wasn't just about Julian. Not anymore. The scent of garlic hit Liam as soon as he stepped out of the guest room. He followed it toward the kitchen like a trail, half expecting to find Margot in silence, headphones on, fully immersed in whatever she was cooking. Instead, she was swaying slightly to jazz, barefoot again, tossing pasta in a pan with practiced ease. Her hair was down this time, and her sweatshirt had been replaced by a thin black tank top with a low scoop in the back, paint still smudged along one shoulder blade. He lingered in the doorway. You staring or just waiting for me to burn something? She asked without turning around. Multitasking, Liam said. That smell is borderline illegal. It's store-bought sauce. I just know how to fake effort. That's basically my life motto, he replied, stepping inside. Margot glanced at him over her shoulder. Well, editor man, hope you like your faked effort served over fettuccine. I've eaten gas station ramen on 3 continents. I'm not picky. She handed him a bowl a few minutes later. No fancy garnish, no placemats. They sat at the small round table beneath the kitchen window where dusk spilled in like warm watercolor. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Liam appreciated it, the lack of pressure to perform conversation. With most people, silence felt like something to be filled. With Margot, it felt like something shared. You still write? She asked, finally twirling pasta around her fork. Less than I should. Mostly editing these days, travel stuff still sometimes. Mostly I fix blog posts for lifestyle influencers who think wanderlust is a personality. She smiled. That feels tragic. It is, but it pays rent mostly. And I still get to write for me. Do you? He paused, then shook his head. Not lately. Why, he shrugged. Grief is bad for narrative structure. She made a quiet sound agreement, maybe understanding. I haven't painted anything real since Julian died, she said. Liam looked up. What's real? Something you can't undo. He nodded slowly. What happened between you two? Margot's eyes narrowed just slightly. You want the polite version or the one I don't usually tell? Always the second one. She leaned back in her chair, the bowl half forgotten. Julian loved being adored. He needed it like oxygen. And for a long time, I gave it to him. I made space. I let myself get smaller because it felt like being needed until I couldn't anymore. Liam listened silent. He started fading, depressed, angry sometimes, and I stopped being the version of me he liked. So I let. Did he ask you to stay? He didn't stop me. Liam set down his fork. I'm sorry. Margot looked at him. You don't need to be. That's the problem with your family. You think everything broken needs to be apologized for. He swallowed hard. I think I just never knew the full picture. No one ever does, she said. Not even the people inside the frame. They cleaned up together. She washed, he dried. As they stood by the sink, he glanced at her. I read more of his journal. Margot didn't look at him. I figured. There was a line, Liam said, drying a plate. Some people carry you even after they put you down. She closed her eyes briefly. He always did know how to make grief poetic. Liam hesitated, then asked, "Do you still love him?" Margot opened her eyes. Not the version of him that died, but the version who made space for me in the beginning. The one who used to call my hands tiny hurricanes. That version I think I'll always love. The silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. Liam set the plate down. You talk about him like someone who loved him honestly. I did, she said, and he loved me honestly until he couldn't anymore. The next day, Liam wandered down the street into town. The coastal breeze followed him through narrow roads lined with old bookstores and cafes that tried too hard. He stopped at the one Julian used to love, the Rookery, and grabbed a coffee. The barista recognized him, asked how long he was visiting. He said he wasn't sure. Back at the cottage, Margot was painting again, this time on the barn wall. A swirling mix of deep reds and navy blues, something abstract and bold. He watched her from a distance, at first camera in hand, snapping a few frames. She didn't notice, or if she did, she didn't mind. Eventually, he stepped closer. That's supposed to be anything in particular. No, she said. It's what it feels like to not know what the hell you're doing. He smirked. Looks familiar. She turned to him. You ever think about why you left all the time? I couldn't stand being the extra in Julian's movie. Margot nodded. He had a way of writing everyone's part but his own. They stood together, eyes on the wall. She handed him a brush. He blinked. What paint? I'm not an artist. Perfect, she said. Neither am I when I'm honest. He hesitated, then dipped the brush in a thick gold. Together they filled the wall, messy, awkward strokes, patches of silence, and laughter that came out of nowhere. At some point, paint ended up on his shirt, then on her arm, then on his cheek. It became a game, a dance, a truce. By the time the sun began to dip, the mural was something between chaos and communion. They sat on the grass out of breath. You ever think Julian would have hated this? She asked. Definitely, Liam said. Good. She smiled. He looked at her, really looked. I think he never saw you the way you really are. Margot glanced at him sideways. And you think you do, I'm starting to. She didn't say anything, just leaned over and rested her head lightly against his shoulder. For once, there were no ghosts in the moment, only paint breath and something real starting to grow. Liam woke up to the smell of coffee and the soft scrape of a paintbrush against canvas. It had become a kind of domestic soundtrack, one he hadn't expected to like. The walls of the guest room, still neutral and bare, felt less empty now. Maybe because he wasn't just passing through this time. The cottage creaked with morning. Light filtered in through the slats, casting golden bars across the wooden floor. He pulled on a hoodie and wandered into the kitchen to find Margot standing in front of the open back door, her mug balanced in one hand, a streak of cerulean paint across her cheekbone. You're up early, he said. She turned just slightly, gave a half smile. Old habit? Paint before the students steal all my creative energy. Big day of finger painting. Actually self-portraits, which is basically psychological warfare. Liam chuckled, pouring his own coffee. Sounds brutal. They're brutal in the best way, she said. They draw themselves with fire hair or wings or fangs, unapologetically strange, before the world teaches them to flatten themselves out. He sipped his drink, leaning against the counter. What would you have drawn at that age, Margot thought? Probably a volcano with legs. He raised an eyebrow. Terrifying and somehow completely accurate. Exactly, she smirked. Then her expression shifted. Actually, when I was 13, I drew myself with no mouth. Liam blinked. Seriously? She nodded. I was tired of being misunderstood, so I made it literal. That's kind of heartbreaking. It was mostly honest. They stood in silence for a moment, sipping their coffee, the breeze from the back door stirring the curtain. Then Margot asked, You still planning to leave after the weekend? Liam hesitated. That depends on whether you still want me here. Her eyes met his, and for a second, something unspoken tightened between them. Then she looked away. I'm used to people leaving, Liam, she said. It's the staying that throws me. I've spent a lot of time leaving, he replied, but I don't want to run from this. Margot was quiet, thoughtful. Then she said, "Come with me today." He blinked. "Where I'm painting a new wall downtown. Mural commission. You can help or heckle. Either way, I could use the company." Liam smiled. "Lead the way, Volcano." The building was an old bakery that had closed during the first lockdown and never reopened. Its exterior was a bland stucco canvas, perfect for color. Margot pulled out crates of spray paint rollers and drop cloths while Liam watched from the curb. "You always work solo?" he asked. "Usually," she said, "but they gave me a small stipend to finish it faster. Thought I'd pretend you were my unpaid intern." "Glad I have a title now." He helped lay out the supplies. As she started to sketch the outlines of the piece, he caught glimpses, swirls of flame, broken ladders, open windows, hands reaching upward. "What's it supposed to be?" he asked. "Resilience," she said. "Not the shiny kind, the kind that crawls." He stared at it longer. "That's beautiful and raw." She turned to him. "You think Julian would have liked it?" Liam thought about it. He liked things he could label. "You're harder than that." She gave him a long look. "That wasn't an insult." "I know," he said. "It's what I like about you." The wind picked up slightly. Margot's hair blew across her face. Liam reached to tuck it behind her ear, then hesitated. She caught the motion, her breath hitching slightly, but she didn't pull away. "I'm not used to this," she said. "To what?" "Being wanted by someone who doesn't already have a version of me in their head. I only want the version you give me," he said quietly. Her eyes darkened. "Careful, Liam. That kind of honesty is a dangerous thing." "Then let's be dangerous." She stepped closer, her gaze lingering on his mouth and for a moment the mural. The town, the past, it all vanished. Then a voice interrupted. "Margot." They turned to see an older woman, gray curls, clipboard in hand, city badge clipped to her sweater. "Miss Hale," the woman said, "your permit. This section was approved for interior wall use, not full height. You'll need to scale back." Margot's smile tightened. "We submitted a revised sketch." "It hasn't been approved yet," the woman said gently but firmly. Margot opened her mouth to argue but then exhaled. "Fine, I'll adjust." The woman walked away and Margot stood stiffly watching her go. "She always that pleasant?" Liam asked. "Small towns love rules," Margot muttered. "Especially when you're someone who doesn't apologize for breaking them." "You okay?" She turned to him. "No, but I will be." That night they sat on the back porch of the cottage, watching the stars blur behind thin clouds. Margot leaned back in the old wooden chair legs, stretched out, bare toes tapping the rail. She held a glass of wine in one hand, a sketchbook in the other. Liam leaned beside her. "Can I ask you something personal?" She smirked. "Isn't that the only kind of question you ask? Why did you really stay here after Julian died?" Her smile faded. She looked into her wine. "Because this place was the only thing that still felt unfinished, like something I hadn't ruined." "You didn't ruin him, Margot." "No, but I watched him unravel, and I didn't stop it. I thought leaving was mercy. Now I'm not sure." "He wrote that he understood why you left," Liam said. "I read that in his journal." She blinked. "He did?" Liam nodded. "He said you deserved better, that he couldn't be that for you anymore." Margot's breath caught. "He never said that to me." He didn't know how. Liam said. "So, he barely knew how to tell me anything either." They sat in silence. "I miss him," she admitted, "but I don't miss us." "That's okay," Liam said. "Both things can be true." She turned to him. "You're good at this. At what? Letting people be complicated." He smiled just a little. "Takes one to know one." She reached out, her fingers brushing his. "What are we doing, Liam?" He laced their fingers together. "Something we won't regret." Her gaze dropped to their hands. "Then let's keep doing it carefully." "Careful can be sexy," he teased. Margot laughed, the sound rich and quiet. "Says the man living in his dead brother's guest room. That's the tagline of my memoir. You're not going to quote poetry at me, are you?" "Only bad poetry, possibly while shirtless." She shook her head. "You're lucky. I like broken people." "You're not broken," he said. Her smile faded into something softer. "Not anymore." He leaned in, kissed her once, slow, patient, like an unspoken question. She answered with the way her hands curved into his shoulders, the way her mouth lingered. When they finally pulled apart, her voice was steady. "Same time tomorrow." He nodded. "Try and stop me." and for the first time in years, they both looked forward to something that wasn't already gone. The mural was finished. Margot stood in the middle of the cracked sidewalk, arms crossed over her paint-streaked t-shirt, staring at it like she wasn't sure whether to laugh or start over. It stretched across the once blank bakery wall in bold sweeping lines. Blue flame hands rising toward a golden window. Ladders bent sideways, clouds tangled in ropes. "Does it feel done?" Liam asked behind her. She didn't turn. No mural ever feels done. You just stop when the risk of messing it up outweighs the compulsion to fix it. "Sounds like relationships," he said, stepping beside her. She smirked. "I see what you did there." He nudged her shoulder. "But does it feel good?" Margot nodded slowly. "It feels honest." They watched as a teenager skated past, paused to look up at the piece, then gave a wordless nod of approval before rolling on. Margot exhaled. High praise from the local youth. "You think Julian would have liked it?" Liam asked. She glanced at him. "That depends. Are we talking Julian the performer? Or Julian the man who used to cry into my hair after waking from nightmares he never talked about?" Liam looked down. "I never saw that version." "I know." She paused. "I think he tried to protect you from it." They began packing up the brushes in empty spray cans. Margot moved with methodical precision. Liam worked beside her, less careful, dropping a paint rag to the ground and stepping on it before noticing. She gave him a half glare. "That was my favorite rag." "You have a favorite rag?" She grinned. "Clearly you don't understand the emotional bond between artist and cleanup materials." "Guess not," he said, offering her a fresh one from the box. "Here, start a new emotional journey." Margot took it, eyes still playful. "You're lucky I'm feeling generous." When everything was loaded into the back of her van, she turned to him. "Come back to the cottage," he nodded. "You don't have to ask." They drove in silence, the kind that had settled into comfort rather than tension. The kind built from shared meals, shared silences, and hours in paint-stained clothes side by side. The moon was rising when they pulled into the gravel drive, a sliver of silver behind drifting clouds. Inside, Margot tossed her keys into the bowl by the door and kicked off her shoes. She went straight for the fridge and poured 2 glasses of wine without asking. Liam leaned against the kitchen counter. "Do you ever stop moving?" Margot handed him a glass. "Only when the chaos outside gets quieter than the one inside." He studied her. "And is it tonight?" She sipped. "A little." They migrated to the living room. The record player hummed something vintage, Etta James maybe, and they sank onto the couch like they'd done it 100 times. Liam rested his arm along the back of the cushions, close but not quite touching her. Margot tucked one leg under herself. "Can I ask you something personal?" He smiled, a little late to start asking now. "Why didn't you come to the funeral?" The question hit like a breath caught in the throat. Liam stared into his glass. "Because I was angry and guilty, and I thought if I stayed gone long enough, I wouldn't feel either anymore." She waited. He continued. "I spent most of my life trailing behind Julian's shadow. He was always louder, smarter. Everyone noticed him first. Even when he failed with flair. I couldn't compete. Didn't want to. So I left." Margot's gaze didn't leave him. "And then when he died, I didn't know what to do with the grief. Liam said I hadn't spoken to him in a year. We fought over something stupid, I don't even remember what, but I remember hanging up on him. I thought there'd be more time." Margot's voice was soft. "There's never enough," he nodded. "I hated that he hurt you. But I didn't understand him either. I think I thought you leaving would shake him back into being better." "It didn't," she said. "But it wasn't your job to save him." "I know that now." A long pause. Then Margot said, "He proposed a week before I left." Liam turned to her, eyes wide. "What?" She nodded slowly. Ring speech, candlelight, the whole dramatic Julian performance. "And you said I said no." "Why? Because I didn't want to become a monument to his guilt," she said. "Because he was drowning and thought putting a ring on me would make it look like love again." Liam absorbed that. "He never told me," he murmured. Margot gave a small, sad smile. Julian didn't talk about the things that scared him. He romanticized them until they looked pretty. That's what he tried to do with me. But I wasn't interested in being edited. Liam watched her, a storm of empathy behind his quiet expression. "He didn't deserve you." Maybe, she said, but for a while he made me feel like someone worth choosing. Liam set his glass down on the coffee table, leaned forward, and now she met his eyes. Now I want someone who sees me and still wants to stay. He reached out, fingers grazing hers. I'm still here, Margot. You might not be forever. No, he said softly, but I'll be here as long as I'm allowed to be. Margot held his gaze and then slowly, cautiously leaned in. Their lips met, tentative at first, then deeper, a kiss drawn from months of grief, tension, and words they hadn't dared to say. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't supposed to be. When they pulled back, foreheads pressed together, breath shallow, Margot whispered, "This scares the hell out of me." He smiled, "Me too." They stayed like that, tangled in the quiet aftermath of something fragile and real. Eventually, Margot said, "Stay the night." Liam didn't ask for clarification. He didn't need it. He just nodded. Later, when they lay together in her bed beneath a tangle of linen sheets, Margot rolled onto her side, propping her head on her hand. "I dreamt once that Julian came back," she said. "He stood in the kitchen and asked if I was happy. I couldn't answer. I just stared at him. Then he smiled and said, 'That's all I needed to know,' and walked out the door." Liam reached up, brushing hair from her face. "Maybe he knew you'd be okay." "I don't know if I'm okay," she said, "but I'm different." He pulled her closer. "That's enough." The moon cast soft shadows across the walls, and somewhere outside, waves broke against the distant shore. Inside the cottage, two people who had once orbited the same man now found themselves orbiting each other, not out of obligation, but out of choice. The cottage didn't feel haunted anymore. It wasn't sudden, like a light switch flipping off. It was something quieter, like noticing a room no longer smelled of someone's cologne, or realizing you'd stopped bracing every time someone said his name. It was in the way Liam started brewing coffee in the morning, without hesitation, and the way Margot laughed without glancing toward the door, as if checking to see if someone else was listening. They were still living inside Julian's walls, but for the first time, those walls weren't echoing back only grief. It had been a month since that night. The mural downtown had become a small local attraction. Someone from the regional arts paper came to photograph it, and Margot's principal gave her tentative permission to supervise a student mural project in the spring. Liam had been asked to submit a travel memoir essay for a magazine he never thought would accept him. But none of that compared to the day Margot finally opened the envelope. It had been sitting on the bookshelf, Julian's final letter. Not a will, just folded notebook paper sealed in a blank envelope, addressed only with her name in his hurried scrawl. She'd touched it 100 times, moved it from shelf to desk, from desk to drawer, but she'd never opened it until now. Liam was reading outside when she came to the door, envelope in hand, face unreadable. "I'm going to read it," she said. He rose slowly, setting the book aside. "Do you want me to be here?" "I want you to read it with me." They sat on the back steps together, side by side in the slanted afternoon sun, and she tore the envelope open with careful fingers. Julian's handwriting bled down the page like a confession, both neat and frantic. "Margot, I don't know if you'll ever see this. Part of me hopes you won't. But if you are, then I'm gone, and there's nothing I can fix anymore. You were the best thing I ever had, not just because you loved me, but because you saw me even when I didn't want to be seen. You knew the worst of me and still stayed longer than you should have. I left before I broke completely. That was the truth. You didn't break us. I did. I was afraid not of you, but of what it meant to be worthy of you. If I'm gone, I hope you don't build a shrine out of what we were. I hope you find something that doesn't demand so much pain to prove it's real. You deserve joy without needing to earn it. And if by some impossible grace my brother finds his way back to you, let him. He always knew how to stay when I didn't." Margot's hands were trembling by the end. Her shoulders shook, not with sobs, but with something deeper, a full-body tremor of release. Liam stayed still beside her, his breath a quiet rhythm. He didn't try to touch her, didn't speak. She lowered the letter onto her lap. "He wrote this for me," she whispered, "but he left it for you." Liam turned to her slowly. "What do you mean?" "He knew you'd be the one to find it. He didn't have that kind of faith in me, but he had it in you." Liam shook his head. "I didn't earn that. You did," she said, "by coming back, by staying." They sat in silence as a breeze picked up around them, lifting the corner of the page before Margot gently pressed it flat again. Later that night, they sat at the table eating Chinese takeout from cartons, fortune cookies balanced precariously on napkins. Margot cracked hers open and read aloud, "A great love is worth the risk." Liam laughed. "Is that advice or a threat?" "Both," she said. "What's yours?" He unfolded his cookie fortune and grinned. "You will soon discover something unexpected in familiar places." Margot tilted her head. "That's so on the nose it's insulting." They ate in silence a moment, and then she asked, "You ever going to leave again?" "Honestly," he said, "probably. Not forever, but for a while." Margot nodded, unsurprised. "I wouldn't expect anything less from a man who once booked a flight to Finland because the sky looked lonely." He smiled. "I have a freelance project in Europe starting next month. 4 weeks." Her chopsticks paused. "You weren't going to tell me I was. I just didn't want to turn this into a goodbye before it had to be." "It's not," she said quickly. "It's just a pause." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You're still my landing point." She squeezed his fingers. "And you're the first person I've ever wanted to see leave and come back." They didn't sleep much that night. Instead, they lay in bed beneath the soft linen sheets and told stories, the ones they hadn't dared to tell. Yet the failures, the fears, the secrets they still carried from Julian, from childhood, from years spent holding their breath. And when dawn arrived, breaking across the sky like a quiet apology, they kissed with the understanding that some beginnings come disguised as endings and vice versa. Liam left 3 days later. Margot stood at the platform with his duffel over her shoulder and her hair tied back in that loose knot he'd grown to love. He handed her an envelope before boarding. She frowned. "You're getting sappy on me. Just open it after I'm gone." She rolled her eyes but kissed him hard enough to imprint memory. "I'll be here," she said. "I know." The train pulled out and she stood there until it vanished behind the trees. When she got home, she opened the envelope. Inside was a black and white photo. She recognized it instantly, the mural, but not the full thing. Just a single square one of the painted hands reaching upward toward the gold window. Only this time he'd added a line of handwritten text across the top in ink. "We survive each other. Then we become more." She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was waiting for anything. She was already becoming. The story of Margot and Liam unveils a poignant life lesson. Healing from loss begins when we dare to embrace the messy, honest connections that find us unexpectedly. Bound by their shared grief over Julian, they navigate a fragile dance of pain, guilt, and rediscovery, transforming a haunted cottage into a canvas for new beginnings. Their journey teaches us that love and growth don't erase the past, but weave it into a richer tapestry, allowing us to honor what was while building what could be. Margot's courage to paint again, to open Julian's final letter, and to let Liam in despite her fears, shows that vulnerability is a strength, not a surrender. Liam's choice to stay to see Margot beyond her grief reminds us that true connection lies in accepting others as they are, complex, wounded, yet capable of becoming more. This tale urges us to face our ghosts, to risk loving again, and to trust that even in the shadow of loss, we can create something vibrant and real. What did Margot and Liam's story teach you about grief, love, or second chances? Have you ever found healing in an unexpected bond? Share your thoughts in the comments. We can't wait to hear your stories. If this emotional journey moved you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to join our community of storytellers. Your support keeps these heartfelt narratives alive, so don't miss out. Subscribe now, and let's explore the beauty of human resilience together.